Filipino fans made their way to catch the Pinay tennis phenom in action.
I've been coming to this tournament for 10 years. So I'm excited that we finally have a Filipino here again.
I got a selfie with her, and also this is my first ever tennis tournament ever. So I'm excited. It's special.
Filipina tennis star Alex Eala takes center stage at the BNP Paribas Tennis Paradise in Indian Wells. And of course, Filipino fans turn out in full force.
Something extraordinary is unfolding in the lead up to the Stuttgart Open, and the tennis world has its eyes wide open. Markus Günthardt, the man who runs the Porsche Tennis Grand Prix, has made a move that is rippling across the entire WTA Tour. Alex Eala, the young Filipino player who has been rewriting what people thought was possible in this sport, will not be fighting her way through qualifiers to reach the main draw. Günthardt has handed her a direct entry, and once you understand the full picture of everything that has been building around this athlete, you will see clearly that this was not an impulsive call. It was a decision that the weight of evidence had been pushing toward for a long time. Consider what actually happens inside the mind of a tournament director when a choice like this lands on the table. Günthardt has been at the helm of the Porsche Tennis Grand Prix long enough to understand this business from every angle. He knows that Stuttgart already occupies a rare and privileged position on the WTA calendar. A clay court event carrying decades of history, genuine prestige, and a fan base that keeps coming back year after year. He has no need to manufacture excitement or go chasing attention. But even a tournament that sits on that kind of foundation can feel the difference between a season where the whole world leans in and a season where it simply passes. And Günthardt has spent considerable time watching what unfolds in any city that Alex Eala walks into. What he has observed has shifted his thinking entirely. Because the reality Günthardt is working with is this: every tournament director who is fully committed to Eala, who has given her the center court placement and the main draw position her level demands, has come away from that week with numbers and moments that had no precedent in their event's entire history. That is not a guess or an optimistic projection. It is a pattern that has repeated itself with enough consistency that ignoring it would be almost negligent. And Günthardt is far too seasoned to look at that pattern and fold his hands. Consider Indian Wells. The 2026 edition of that tournament will be referenced in conversations for years to come, and not primarily because of who lifted the trophy. It will be remembered because of what one player did to the entire atmosphere and economy surrounding that event. The instant Eala's opening round fixture was confirmed, fans descended on the ticketing platform with a volume and intensity so overwhelming that the infrastructure cracked under the demand. Prices climbed to heights that no one at that tournament, across its entire history, had ever witnessed. By the time every number was added up, a single first-round match had produced $5 million in ticket revenue. Not a championship match, not a semifinal. A first-round match. The phrase that grew out of that moment, the Eala effect, now travels through every tournament office on the tour. Günthardt has heard it spoken. He understands precisely what it carries. But the Indian Wells story does not stop at the financial figures. What it laid bare was something far more significant. Eala is not simply drawing the traditional tennis audience. She is pulling in people who had never once thought about attending a professional tennis match in their lives. People arriving from every corner of the globe with one shared purpose: to be inside that stadium, to absorb that atmosphere, to stand at the edge of something that feels genuinely historic. When an event begins attracting that kind of crowd, it crosses a threshold. It stops being merely a tennis tournament and becomes a moment that a culture marks on its calendar. Stuttgart now holds the opportunity to be exactly that.
For all the support that's been coming my way, and it's really heartwarming to see that they really they make the effort and they take the time to come out and to support, and it makes the experience for the player.
Then came what unfolded in Austria. When the draw placed Eala against Julia Grabher at the Ladies' Linz Open, the ticket numbers told a story that nobody in that tournament office had been prepared for. 9 out of every 10 seats were filled not by Austrian supporters rallying behind their home nation's player, but by Eala's followers, people who had organized across national borders with deliberate intention, coordinating their efforts to pack that arena. Grabher, competing on the very soil she grew up on, stepped through that tunnel and found herself playing the role of the visiting athlete in her own country. The crowd had already chosen its side before a single ball was struck. Tournament director Sandra Reichel took one look at what was happening and grasped it immediately. She did not hesitate or wait to see how things developed. She made a public commitment to give Eala the largest court her facility could offer and went a step further by announcing that she would personally be there to welcome her to the event. Her words were direct. The atmosphere that was coming would be something the Ladies' Linz Open had never encountered across its 35-year existence. That is not a small statement from someone who has been around the tournament long enough to have seen nearly everything it has produced. Günthardt has read that story in full. He has absorbed every detail of it. And he has sat with the question of what it means when you take everything Eala carries into a room and place it inside a tournament that already has Stuttgart's infrastructure, Stuttgart's reputation, and Stuttgart's capacity to take something electric and make it even larger. The answer to that question is precisely what brought him to the decision he has now made.
And it's great always to welcome new players and newcomers and players who will own the future, I would say. So it's great, to welcome Alexandra here in Linz in this special year.
And then there is Miami. James Blake did not sit back and wait for the momentum to find him. He put Eala on center court and spoke candidly about what her being there would mean for the tournament. He pointed out that her pull had moved well beyond the traditional tennis-watching public, drawing supporters from across Asia, Europe, and North America who did not follow the sport in their ordinary lives. That kind of audience expansion cannot be bought with any marketing campaign ever designed. It only comes from one source: the right player at the right moment. Blake went on record predicting that Miami would shatter its own revenue records on the strength of her presence. Günthardt has taken every word of that seriously. Now consider what makes Günthardt's call even more carefully constructed than it first appears. Stuttgart is a clay court event, and clay demands things from a player that no other surface requires in quite the same way. Physical freshness matters enormously. Tactical clarity matters. Full mental readiness from the very first match matters. Grinding through qualifying rounds has a way of quietly draining all three before the main draw has even opened. By bringing Eala straight into the field, Günthardt is not only making a decision rooted in commercial thinking. He is making a sporting one. He wants her on that clay completely prepared, completely sharp, and completely herself from round one, because he has watched what she produces when those conditions are in place, and he wants Stuttgart to be the stage that hosts that version of her. There is also the lesson sitting in plain sight from the tournaments that failed to embrace her fully. At the Australian Open, she was assigned to smaller, secondary courts despite the staggering level of fan demand surrounding her matches. What followed was disorder. Hundreds of thousands of supporters lined up in queues that stretched beyond reason, with many never making it through the doors at all. Rather than cooling her appeal, that failure only compressed it further. Her supporters emerged from it more united and more determined, and the tournaments that had made wiser choices reaped everything the Australian Open had carelessly left on the table. That misjudgment became a reference point spoken about in tennis offices across the globe. Günthardt has no interest in adding Stuttgart's name to that list. And beyond the logistics and the commercial arithmetic, there is what the players themselves have been saying. Jessica Pegula, one of the most seasoned and respected competitors on the WTA Tour, stepped off the court after facing Eala at the Miami Open and described the atmosphere as something entirely outside anything she had experienced in her entire professional life. The people filling those seats were not watching passively. They were inside every single point. Every rally produced a reaction that Pegula could only describe as extraordinary, a level of raw passion that no other player anywhere on the tour was generating, whether the setting was the Australian Open, Dubai, or Miami. When someone of Pegula's standing says she had never felt anything remotely like it, every corner of the tour stops and listens. And Novak Djokovic, a man whose voice carries more authority in this sport than almost any other alive, declared Eala the greatest tennis player the Philippines has ever produced. That is not the kind of remark you make casually. That is a statement offered by someone who has spent his entire adult life in the company of greatness and knows exactly what it looks like up close. Günthardt has absorbed all of it. The crowd figures, the revenue data, The testimony of players, the stories from tournament director after tournament director who made the call to put Eala where she belongs and watched their event transform as a result. Placing her in qualifying would have required him to look directly at all of that and turn away. It would have meant looking at $5 million generated by a single first-round match at Indian Wells and telling his fans to be patient. It would have meant watching what Reichel built in Linz and what Blake constructed in Miami and then deliberately choosing the opposite path. Against the full backdrop of the 2026 season, that choice would have been impossible to justify. What Günthardt has understood instead is that having Alex Eala inside the main draw is not simply a benefit to her career trajectory. It changes the nature of the event itself. The people walking through Stuttgart's gates on the days she competes will include thousands who have never attended a WTA match in their lives. The energy inside that venue will reach levels the Porsche Tennis Grand Prix has not known before. And the origin point of all of it is this single decision. The decision to look at Alex Eala and say without hesitation, "You do not belong in qualifying. You belong in the main draw. You are the player the world rearranges its schedule to watch." The Eala effect has reached Stuttgart. And under Markus Günthardt's leadership, this tournament is not just ready for it. It has been waiting for it. What are your thoughts on Günthardt's move to place Eala directly in the main draw? Is this driven purely by business logic, or do the sporting considerations carry equal weight? Could Stuttgart become the next defining moment the way Indian Wells was? And with director after director arriving at this same conclusion independently, is the WTA as an institution falling behind in understanding what Eala represents for the future of women's tennis? Bring everything to the comments, because this conversation is nowhere near finished.